So, for example, if you're hog hunting in Texas, being able to fire more rounds in a given time frame will increase your chances of, let's say, removing varmints from your property. That would be a practical usage. But again, I want to clarify that the right to these objects, I believe, is not founded in need, but in the fundamental right of ownership. And the justification for need, I would argue, is not part of the equation.
I think to answer your question directly, it's to prevent is another form of defense of preventing a tyrannical government. The reason why the Second Amendment exists. I think it's
well, technically it was ratified for two particular reasons. In the Northeast, it was ratified because they were worried about subjugation of cities, say like Boston. And in the South, a significant 50+% of the folks to the convention who talked about this from the South were using the island of Haiti as an example in their private correspondence. Haiti had a slave revolt, grabbed the masters, hung them by their toes. This impacts the southern planters. They argued during parts of the Constitutional Convention on that. So it was passed for two dual reasons, just like the bargain they made to stitch the country together was two places. I do want to try and answer your question, Abby. I think something that is instructive. So the advertisements, the advertisements for these things classify them as semi-automatic. And it translates to me, it's not an exact translation, but when I was about 15, I decided I wanted to take our lever action 22 and I had like a 25-round magazine, not one you pack, but just like a tube magazine. And I went as fast as I could with the lever action. My grandmother came over to me and I got jumped for misuse of bullets. Point being, I was trying to fire it as fast as humanly possible. What I think, at least they're advertising themselves as, is, hey, we allow you quicker time on that trigger finger, but you still actually have to squeeze it. I think the place to argue would be that a bump stock, which that a bump stock acts more like a selector switch in the magazine, or in the, and it's where the magazine trigger assembly are. If you alter a piece in that assembly, you can put a selector switch on it and make full auto. But I think that's at least part of the answer. Anyway, hope that helps.
So
I think sorry. Go.
So what I think is interesting about this is that, a generation ago, you had a Supreme Court justice say to say that, the biggest fraud put upon the American people was that there's an individual right to keep and bear arms. You got to remember, it wasn't until the Heller decision that they kind of created this individual right. Now you have a Supreme Court that's clearly going to expand it. What I think is going to be interesting is just how far they go. Are they going to eventually end up overthrowing, the American Firearms Act of 32, which would, mean you can have belt-fed machine guns and that sort of thing? Would a Mark 19 be legal? And then...
Just hold on 2 seconds. I want to make something plain, and Roger made it very plain. There's already a way to do this. It just requires...
Yeah, I know.
It's for the member rights.
Well, yes, there is a way to do it. But it's very difficult to do it. And you still have a law making it extremely difficult to do it. So, if the right to keep and bear arms is so fundamental, this thing that the Supreme Court just kind of created in Heller, how far will they take it? Are we a decade?
This line is not fundamental. It is, the Second Amendment is a fundamental right, but not an unlimited one. The non-permissive one, and it's inside of that.
Well,
The
well,
taverns,
no,
esoteric
yeah, but Kennedy
roots can be traced back to Renaissance occultists
so
like
kind of, again, I think the question is how far does this current court push this? And I think they'll push it quite far. And then eventually, what will be the political ramification when they do something that's extremely unpopular, which it will be.
I'd like to push back on this concept that DC versus Heller was just some invention of SCOTUS to give individual rights to firearms. I think it was just a reaffirmation of what's clearly stated in the Constitution, and that's just kind of how.
Yeah, I mean, at least previously, the right to keep and bear arms was explicitly linked to militias, which the court had read as essentially a right to keep a state militia. Now, you can say that's how commas work, blah blah blah, but I'm saying before Heller, that's how it was read, and that was widely accepted. I mean, you don't have a justice of the Supreme Court essentially say, this is fictitious unless it was read that way.
Yeah, I would have to push back and disagree with you on that. During the ratification of the Constitution, the Second Amendment just post, it was lawful for private citizens to own cannons. So I think you're probably going to have to reformulate your argument a bit. The right of the people to keep and bear arms is pretty clear, and the comma is what separates the militia. So I think. I don't know. I think your entire premise is kind of come on.
There's also another piece of this, which
Why
I
did
think.
the American Firearms Act have no constitutional challenge?
Hold on a second. I think it.
Just point of a clarification, I think you mean the National Firearms Act, not the American.
You are correct. I missed that. I misspoke.
The National Firearms Act is what he was talking about. Dude, I forgot where it was. I'm sorry. I completely forgot.
7, 6, 5, 4.
I'm not certain that's true. There's never been a challenge brought up to SCOTUS for the NFA. I don't know. I need to know about that actually. As a matter of fact, we'll just research it maybe, but maybe you can clarify.
7, 6, 5, 4.
I remember what it was. Part of the tradition in the discussion of militias were English militias. English militias historically go back to these fjords, which are dark age assemblies of people who had to bring weapons. So there were other competing European views on how to do that. But in an English sense, in particular in the 9th through like the 11th to 12th centuries, you had to bring your own weapons to war unless you were, a knight or something like that.
So it looks like there was at least one case which challenged the constitutionality of the NFA. Obviously they lost because we still have the NFA, but there was at least challenges to it.
The point is not the challenges. The point that one, the challenges were shot down and was widely seen as constitutional. It still is widely seen as constitutional, but I kind of doubt. Like I imagine FA next thing to get just like that. So I mean, if you're a gun bunny, in 10 years you'll have the right to have a machine, belt-fed machine gun with ease. If you have children, you might have a few holes in it.
But we're not going to pretend somebody is an expert in
Wait,
something.
you think the possession of a machine gun will make them more likely for their kids to grab it?
I'm being honest. I know.
But a
it is
belt-fed
what
machine
it is.
gun, it would make mass shootings much more deadly. Much more.
If you're going to make a statement and open
Which is
the
precisely
door
why
of
we don't legislate for
impact slavery on today's economic standards.
The problem here, and the problem I always have, the anti-2A approach, or even, what you might consider a nuanced, half gun control kind of approach, is that the intent of the law, as I understand it, is to create a net positive, right? And if the law does not create a net positive, then I have a moral objection to it. And if we find ourselves in situations where we're using the law to prohibit items which can only be prohibited retroactively with punishment, so to speak, and the availability of these items is not dramatically decreased based on the existence of these laws, I begin to have a problem with that. If you tell law-abiding citizens that they're not allowed to possess something that's easily manufactured or fabricated by those who don't particularly care to follow the law, you're creating a disadvantage for those and really a disincentivization of being a law-abiding citizen. I feel the same way about...
So wait, I have a question on something you just said. I just have to stop you. When you said easily manufactured, so you could take fertilizer, right, and some other items and make a bomb, or,
Yep.
right? So easily manufactured, however, owning a bomb is illegal, yet easily manufactured. Same argument with using the rubber band to make the bomb stop.
It's not entirely true, actually. You can go on Amazon right now and order a binary explosive cannon and have it delivered to you from your door. Owning explosives is not illegal. They're used every day in industry. There are people whose entire career path is to understand the safe and reasonable usage of explosives. So my general point here is I'm sitting 3 feet away from a 3D printer, and I can take a lawfully purchased AR-15 and print myself a bump stock. I can print myself a device to give me select fire. I can print myself an entire firearm. So the idea that these laws will measurably reduce the private ownership of these items with the intent of creating a higher standard of safety for the general public is the point that I push back on. I think it just it negatively impacts those who would otherwise be willing to follow the law, is the point that I'm getting at.
Okay, so there's a place I want to go. We've got some new people who we spent a bit of time on this conversation. I'm walking up a little bit hot, so it's a little bit different. Nicholas, Matt, have you guys had a chance to speak? If you all have, great. If not, Nicholas, you want to go first?
If not, I'd like to just say something.
Matt, you already go in? Matt.
Are we looking for a new topic?
My point was, your side point is that
No, we're going to stay on topic. I just need to hear people.
generally speaking, the bump stocks, machine guns is a debatable point. But yeah, it's to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government. In the most simplistic form, this is the reason why it's there. It's guns save a shitload more lives than cost lives. According to the FBI, it's millions of lives a year guns save.
Somewhere between 150,000 to 2 million, depending on how you look at the numbers. But yeah, there's significantly more defensive uses of firearms, lawful defensive uses of firearms in this country every year than unlawful.
I hate guns, but the 2 times
How
I
do you
needed it,
stop this?
I hate guns, but the 2 times I've needed them, I've called my neighbor who has an arsenal of weapons. I've always been meaning to buy a shotgun. I kind of hate guns. I'd love to get rid of all guns. I really would. I wish if I could wave my magic wand, I'd get rid of all guns and alcohol. But guess what? That's not up to me, so...
Monica, do you want to go?
Oh, I'm a 2A rights advocate. I mean, the Bill of Rights is there for a reason, and the 2A is there for when the 1A isn't honored. So, I think our focus should be on mental health. someone reminded me today about Stephen Paddock and the 58 people he murdered and the hundreds he wounded during that country music concert in Las Vegas in 2017. What I wonder about is how come we've memory hold that? How come we haven't investigated that?
Monica, you and I've talked about this before. It's been investigated up the kazoo. I mean, this one I can firsthand talk about. And to this day, they can still have found, after spending, I don't know how much resources from law enforcement, national as well as state, local, and paying out over $800 million in lawsuits from MGM. This is a lone wolf that they have yet to find any motives. I mean, he had a girlfriend that they thought would be a clue to something, and there was nothing. He cased out a different festival before this one, which was the Life is Beautiful festival, and Sully had a better shot as to where he was aiming at the festival, doing it from Mandalay Bay as opposed to downtown where the other festival was. I mean, that's all they were able to really garner, but to this day it's a mystery to everybody, but there has been an inordinate amount of law enforcement and also private investigative resources from the families that were affected. And it's just the saddest day probably ever in the history of the city, and will remain that way, but they couldn't tie it to anything else, and they won't.
So that's the largest mass shooting on U.S. soil I don't want to say history, but quite some time, huh?
Yeah, it's the largest. I mean, as a result, the law changed. I mean, not just the law, the policy. You can't check into a casino right now with a bunch of suitcases like that without scrutiny. And you have a lot of people that were staying at that hotel that come in for trade shows. So they'll come in with several suitcases because it might have merchandise for their trade show. But everything changed as a result of that.
And can someone remind me what a black swan event is?
It's when a lot of swans fly in and they're black. And it's
Is it just like a fluke?
Sorry, black swan is the, so for the longest time, the definition of the swan was it was white. Because all the swans that we have experienced were black swans, white swans. And then I think in Australia they found a subspecies of swan that was black, and then changed the whole outlook on what the definition of the swan is. I think the derivative of that in terms of black swan event is something that is unforeseen, where all the most terrible things line up, the planets line up, and it creates this unique singularity that is impossible otherwise.
Look, I can also tell you that the same night that this monster decided to attack and shoot at the festival was the first preseason game of our brand new hockey team. And you had an arena with about 17,000 people 2 blocks away from where the shooting was, that everyone had gotten out by 9:30. They had left the arena. So you can imagine, again, he was looking for just a mass amount of people, and he landed on the Mandalay Bay site, but there was large gatherings that night as well.
One mass shooting you never hear talked about much is Wounded Knee. There's more people killed at Wounded Knee in a mass shooting than in any other point in American history.
Wasn't it Tucker's Last Stand?
No, that was different.
Would you mind writing Wounded Knee? I don't remember.
It was in 1890 Lakotas. But the Army, the U.S.
That was
Army.
a bunch of federal troops marched in and, with a bunch of like parrot guns. They killed everybody in Canada.
Yeah, I think that's pretty close, Marshall. I'd have to look up the exact details of it, but yeah, that was the worst mass shooting. It occurred in 1890, perpetuated by the government.
Does that really, like, is that categorized under a mass shooting? Don't we usually call mass shooting something that is like a individual, not
Definitionally, it only means more than 4 people shot in one place. That's how they categorize it today.
Which we've really got to work out. We've got to have a better name for that than like, you know, a gangland retaliatory, territory shooting is compared to somebody who has some kind of wild political motivation and goes and shoots innocent people they know nothing about. Like, there needs to be some sort of demarcation for that, because like what Stephen Paddock did and what happens in like, the south side of Chicago are not the same thing.
Okay, who just made that point?
That was me. That was.
Oh yeah, they what 3 or 4 people just to like make it like black people were mass shooters. But like you said, what Stephen Paddock did is a distinct difference what he did and what happened. Not excusing what happened in Chicago or no, they shouldn't lump that in as a mass shooting, the same as what Paddock did.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the only way the data is being collected and they're only looking at shootings with 4 or more casualties and they're not looking deeper into the ideological motivations or the mental health of the shooter or any of those things, like, we're really doing ourselves a disservice to understand these things better. But the fact remains is I think Abby sort of maybe not even intentionally made the point earlier that, racing fuel and fertilizer did a hell of a number in Oklahoma City, and there wasn't a single shot fired in that incident. So I think this idea of like just vilifying the weapon, I feel like it's a easy feeling solution that actually turns out to be a non-solution. I think people can wrap themselves up tightly in their blankets at night and feel more comfortable if we have a legislative answer to this.
Holly, what do you think?
So I would think that the Las Vegas shooting would classify as a black swan if Andre's definition is appropriate.
Hey, Monica, welcome to Chatter.
Well, thank you.
I still can't get on, Roger.
I'll see if I can.
Let's see if I can message Nelson to get you on the coolest new app in
So
the
after I
world.
saw your account and you have a pre-follow, actually you have a couple pre-follows, so you're gonna have a soft landing once you get there.
I just keep getting that same firewall that says Nelson's got to open up space. I can't get beyond that.
Unreal. Unreal.
And Karen from apartment 34B has also joined Chatter. I hope you join her conversation where she talks about the block party and what she should bring to it.
If you do join Chatter, make sure you join Healthy Debates on Chatter. Thank you.
Roger, do you have to have an invitation to join Chatter?
What you have to do is download Test Flight, then you have to download Chatter, and then you have to give me your username, and I will pull the levers in which will allow you to be part of the beta. Or you can wait until it's invite only, and then you'll just wait for an invitation. Depends. If you want to be an early adopter, follow this.
Roger.
Are they allowing invite only this weekend? Are they opening it up?
The head designer last night was saying that
originally the goal was this weekend, but it's definitely going to be within the next few days. They don't know exactly, although I don't want to speak for them. They'll give an update. But the head designer made it sound like it's probably not happening today or tomorrow.
I tried to do a replay this morning, and then I couldn't re-listen to it, and then I found out, well, that feature is not turned on yet. I'm like, oh, well, that explains why I can't listen to it.
Amazing. Oh dear God, those poor people. Fucking poor bastards.
Is the topic of the room still going on, or are we on to something else?
Let's go back to 2A, right?
Let's go back to regular scheduled programming. Thanks, Philip.
2A.
No, I wasn't trying to be rude. I was just trying to.
2A.
No. What, regardless of intent, it was well timed. We should get back to the topic. Thank you.
Is anybody? Did anybody hear the other half of that sentence? Because all I heard is anybody surprised? Is anybody actually surprised by this? Like, the Supreme Court's the most predictable Supreme Court I think I've ever seen at this point. Is anybody surprised about any of the rules that have
I
come
was
out in the last
surprised there
2
was a
weeks?
unanimous decision. Wait, was it? Wait, maybe I'm thinking about the birth control one. There was one recent unanimous decision that I was like, oh, unanimous.
Yeah, why is the birth control one surprising?
I was surprised that every single justice voted unanimously for it, the decision.
I mean, you understand the court. I don't think there's any surprises here. In a 6-3 decision on bump stocks, I could have predicted that 2 years ago with the same court. You know, it actually shows you that there's judicial philosophy, and that actually is pretty easy to see where they're going to turn out on those things.
I understood that this was the most agreeable SCOTUS, and they've reached more unanimous decisions in the history of the court, but I could have gotten that wrong.
Philip, while you're looking into your crystal ball with your expertise on the decision-making of the Supreme Court, can you tell me when I'm going to get to have fully automatic pew-pews and when I'll be able to own a suppressor without a tank?
Have you read any of the Heller decisions or anything like that?
I'm familiar with the Heller decision.
Well, go read Justice Anthony Scalia, and you will know the answer to that.
Well, the question wasn't if. It was a when.
All right, well, go read it, and you tell me. I don't think this stuff is actually that hard to parse. Like Trump, Orange Man tried to do something that was beyond his scope to do. Like pretty much every president we've had since Bush at this point has been fully on board this idea of executive decisions. If they don't have, they can violate the laws that are currently on the books. So, as much as I'm not in favor of bump stocks in general, I don't think if you want to ban bump stocks, there's a way to do it. It's called Congress. It's not called executive action.
Well, we at least agree on that part.
But isn't the ultimate law in the book the standard of whether a law can survive Supreme Court, or not Supreme Court, but the Constitution rigor? I mean, if it's on the books, doesn't make a Constitution.
Well, that's a good point, except for, Justice Anthony Scalia and Heller said that Congress does have the right when it comes to gun rights, and he made that quite clear, but he also talked about the standard of how they have to do it. So the blueprint on this stuff is pretty clear. You're not allowed to own a fully automatic weapon, that's basically, if you believe the Heller decision, then that's pretty much spelled out in there.
You are allowed to own a fully automatic weapon, though.
No, you have to get a license and it's regulated from.
Well, that's different from you're not allowed to own one.
No. There's a difference between having the right to own a gun and having the right to own a fully automatic. You don't necessarily have the right to have a fully automatic.
Philip, before you guys talk past each other, let's just get into the nuance.
you can have a fully automatic weapon. There's certain conditions that need to be met. If you want to get into the nuance of a right versus, being allowed to jump through this hoop or that hoop, that's fine. But I think the important distinction here is there's some people that believe that you cannot have a fully automatic weapon in the United States, and that's just patently false. And I think that's the point that Stilgar would make. And so rather than getting into, like the philosophical debate about what a right is, just understand that, if you pay for a stamp, surrender your Fourth Amendment right, willing to pay the money and buy a firearm that was manufactured before 1986, you could absolutely have a fully automatic weapon. That's the material fact.
Yeah, Ron, you know exactly what I'm saying. You just called it out, so there's material fact on that one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you just misspoke, Philip. I mean, saying
I didn't misspoke.
Well, you said no one can own a fully automatic firearm.
I never said, no, I didn't say that. I said you're going to...
Okay, sure.
Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, like the birth control decision really wasn't a decision. They basically said there was no standing. I mean, people have to understand the difference between these rulings. Not having standing and them actually ruling on the actual issue of human things. And Abby's in the room. I mean, Abby might say anything that's crazy.
No, I mean, the standing issue, everyone knows that. It doesn't mean that they've ruled on the merits, they've just ruled on whether it's right or it's standing. And that's not touching on the actual merits of the constitutionality of the.
And Abby, are you surprised by either one of the rulings?
The bump stock I'm upset about, but not surprised. I just hope that legislation gets on the books fast. I'm gonna be different than everyone in the room on it, but it's a personal effect on me. So it's just I come from, and I said this earlier in the other room. If you talk to the far left or the far right that live in this city and lived through October 1st, you will get the same answer.
Could I ask you a question? Well, wait, hold on. So, because somebody used the bump stock, we would say that the proper thing to do would be to ban the bump stock? Is that what you're saying?
I've just come from the position that if it's foreseeable that someone would take something like that and use it the way it was used by PATA, and I just don't see the necessity to have them in our
but the thing to understand, Abby, is that Americans can buy fully automatic weapons and not need to buy a bump stock at all, and if they know what they're doing, they can replicate that action with a simple rubber band. And so, when people start talking about banning bump stocks, typically what they're talking about is they want to solve a problem, but they don't know how. And banning bump stocks doesn't do anything to solve the problem because, again, it's perfectly legal to purchase a fully automatic weapon. You don't need a bump stock. So it's kind of a moot point. And what I've noticed is that people that are against the bump stock either don't understand what a bump stock is, or it's some sort of an emotional response. It's not really rooted in, actual problem solving.
Well, but you just heard in the room as to go in and buy an automatic weapon. It's not like Joe on the street can buy it. You have to go through a process on getting an automatic weapon. It's not every gun owner that can have one. And there's a scrutiny, correct?
I'd also like to push back on this concept that all residents of Las Vegas, regardless of where they fall on their opinions of the Second Amendment, all of a sudden, as a result of what happened in the Mirage, are...
It was at Mandalay Bay. It was at Mandalay Bay, and I think if you took...
The point that I'm making, Abby, is that not everybody who lives in Las Vegas... Abby, you interrupted my statement. I'd like to finish. The point that I'm trying to make is not everybody in Las Vegas, as a result of being near that particular incident, feels the same way you do. I think that's a little bit...
I would... Well, no, I'm not hijacking, and I'm a gentleman, so I'll happily put money that if you took a poll of the residents of Las Vegas...
These fucking people just really know how to crush the gun debate.
Hold on,
Easily.
You wouldn't need to take
hold on a second. Hold on. Still gotta ask a question. You may hate me for it. do you live in Nevada or anywhere near Las Vegas?
I don't, but that's an appeal to authority. The fact remains
No,
that
no,
there's the possibility to suggest that.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. Everyone, hold on. Listen, I understand what Abby's saying. Abby's saying, hey, I live here, this is the sentiment. And then what Stilgar is saying is that regardless of the sentiment, there's still the idea of, are we thinking about this rationally? And I would say that these types of reactions, like banning bump stocks after a shooting in Mandalay Bay or passing the Patriot Act after 9/11, these are reactionary laws that are designed to placate people that have had an emotional response to these things. These are not policies that actually solve problems, is my point. And so everyone's free to think what they want on these things, vote how they want on these things, and we can have a discussion about them. But at the end of the day, banning bump stocks doesn't save lives. The Patriot Act didn't save lives, and so what both of those things did was restricted the rights of law-abiding citizens. And if you want to maximize human freedom, in my opinion, you oppose those things. But I totally agree that, I don't want to dismiss what Abby's saying. Abby's saying that as a community, after that shooting happened, the sentiment changed. And Abby's a Republican, and I would imagine, overall would like to protect the Second Amendment. And so I don't think we should attack her for her opinion on this thing. But I think that we're approaching this conversation from different levels. One person is responding to an incident that happened in their hometown, and then everybody else is making either a legal or an emotional argument. So, anyways.
Thank you, Roger. And also, our Supreme Court. Okay, just very quickly, and that's a really valid point. I mean, I think the sentiment in the city changed. I think, and this is a gun-friendly state and a gun-friendly city, and guns are very popular here and easy to own. But I think the sentiment generally changed about bump stocks. And I know, talking to one of the Supreme Court justices, we were pretty, at the time of the ruling, when the Nevada Supreme Court heard the case, there were a lot of Republicans, significant Republicans on the Supreme Court. And, as I said, she cried her eyes out that she had to rule and not find liability on the manufacturer. And I think that it's a very raw emotional issue for a lot of people here. So it's going to sway the electorate and how the public feels about it. And that's just what happens after a tragedy. I wonder if you went to, where is it, Fort Lauderdale, or the area where Marjorie Stoneman is, and you interview people, or you go to Sandy Hook. I mean, it's going to affect the community. It's that community. It doesn't mean that the whole nation, but with respect to here, it's law for people. That's all I'm saying. And yes, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment.
I just have one comment to make, Polly, and then I can pass the mic right to you, is that the fact that it was a country music concert is not lost on me. And I think they're
so touching.
Spidey senses go on alert. And I know the argument.
She's got Spidey senses?
I still think it was designed for conservatives to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we need gun control. And that's just...
It was designed for conservatives to say maybe we need gun
It
control.
wasn't. He was down at Life is Beautiful, piecing it out, which is a very far left festival. So you just can't make that argument. They have evidence showing that he was casing out large festivals to find something that he could shoot up. So and that one just, and they have hard evidence on that as well.
Well, I think they should take the bumps off. Hold on, Monica. Someone else on the stage.
Stephen, I was trying to hand whoever's talking and trying to get the mic up.
Yeah. But talking while I'm talking is not going to fix the problem. Here's the issue, okay? And we're not going to solve it in this room or any other room. Is that some people just disagree on what gun ownership rights really look like. Some of us are zealots and believe it's absolute. Others believe, you gotta have these common sense gun laws. But what I can tell you is that when somebody makes the decision to shoot somebody, shoot to kill, whether it's with a handgun, a shotgun, a long rifle, regardless of what size ammunition that they have, if they're using an accessory like a bump stock, the one thing that is clear is that they don't respect your laws. And so the thing to keep in mind is that murder is against the law. Assault with a deadly weapon is against the law. These things are already against the law that you don't want to happen. And so when you buy into this idea that, ooh, if we had some further restriction, that would solve the problem, I think you're missing the point that if somebody wants to murder somebody, they're going to find a way to do it, and that is already against the law. So you guys can have your argument, but just remember that the more that you erode that Second Amendment protection, you're really eroding the ability of people to defend themselves. And so I just, like, sometimes it's important to decouple the emotion, from the actual issue and try to figure out what problem are you trying to solve, and with that action that you're taking, would that reasonably solve it? And then, and I would ask you, if people already know that murder is against the law and they're willing to break that law, which of these laws do you reasonably think people?
Roger, I respect that argument. As a question for you. Hold on. A very simple question. Very simple question. During the Rodney King riots in LA, heroic Korean store owners went to the roof and they had very rapid firing weapons, and because they could lay down an enormous amount of firepower, the looters spared Koreatown from being burned down. Those buildings in Koreatown that had multiple snipers on the roof were saved. The buildings that didn't have multiple snipers were burned down because the leftists refused to defend Koreatown. I'll be succinct here. The leftists and progressives, they moved the police force back to defend the wealthier neighborhoods like Trentwood, like Westwood. The leftists and progressives allowed the Asian neighborhoods to be burned down. Asian people had to defend themselves. That is a documented fact. The question I have for you, Roger, and then I'll land my plane, is why did none of the store owners during the 2020 looting, to the best of my knowledge, the store owners did not pull out weapons and defend themselves. They left their stores to be burned down. Why is there a change in behavior from store owners in between the time of the Rodney King riot using weapons versus in 2020 not using weapons?
I would say the lack of Korean snipers. But look, God bless the Koreans in LA. And honestly, what you're talking about, yes, you see less of it, but even when you do see the defense against looters, that gets criticized as well. Let's not forget that Kyle Rittenhouse was protecting businesses when he was assaulted by people with guns, and when he returned fire, he ended up killing people, and the courts rightfully exonerated him. And again, you guys can feel however you want about Kyle Rittenhouse, but the court agrees with me.
Far does a right?
Well, actually, hold up. Let's actually take what Roger's saying. Roger, it's more than courts. It actually was peers. That's actually more crucial to hear that. Peers actually agreed that he was defending himself. So the court adjudicated trial. So, and the only reason I even push that forward is because, we're not.
Hey, let me just interrupt real quick and just say, for those of you that heard the sound effect, just because an app has a feature doesn't mean you need to use it. And so let me just let people know, if you use a sound effect in this room, it interrupts while somebody's speaking, and I'm not going to allow that. So Frank, your dumb ass is in the audience because of that, and I wanted to just announce that so people don't think that that they can do that. So you use a fucking sound effect, you're going to the goo. Sorry, Philip.
No, you're good. I just think at the end of the day, like, we keep seeing the courts, and we keep seeing people with their peers, looking at their peers in the court system, exonerate people on use of force when it's appropriate. So it's very, very interesting. I think going back to the subject of the Supreme Court, when I first asked the initial question, was anybody surprised about the ruling? Abby's not surprised about it, which tells you that she understands it, and she put on the table she has an emotional sentiment towards the whole issue. So anybody that thinks Abby's not rational or Abby isn't able to put her emotions aside, I don't think that's true at all. I think Abby's just saying that she doesn't necessarily understand the purpose of it. If you listen to Roger's explanation, which is, I think, just as good, is he's asking people to take your personal emotions out of it and just look at what a right is. And a lot of this stuff is pretty fascinating because while the left will sit here and criticize the Supreme Court today on that ruling, what they're not going to say is that same criticizing this ruling, you look at yesterday's ruling, it all comes down to the ability of getting the actual Congress to actually legislate, which is where the majority of the problems in our nation face right now. Do I get rid of bump stocks legislated? And I think a lot of people, you can do that through legislative action, regardless if people agree that it should be done or not. It's doable.
Phil, can I ask you a question? The right to self-defense or defense of one's property and what you need, essentially what is the threat level coming at you? If you got one or two guys coming at you, threatening you, obviously you can take care of that without tremendous amount of firepower. Now, like the previous speaker was talking about the Rodney King riots, when you got civil anarchy within a major metropolitan area, and you may be facing 30, 40 people threatening you or your livelihood, at what point do you say, no, you don't have this level of firepower to defend against this level of threat? And who makes that decision that at what point you're not allowed to ramp up the firepower to meet the threat?
Well, what's the limiting principle of what you just said? Like how far can you take this? Can you have a Mark 19? Can you have a 240 Bravo? Just asking.
Are you what's your name, Philip? Just curious.
I just wanted to interrupt the kind of sucking off going of gun buddies.
Well, you didn't even know. Oh, Brett, bless your heart. Because
I'm going to remind people, a group of folks who lived like they lived in certain places during the 600s with a mixture of Toyota Hiluxes, BMPs, not very many of them, a Soviet automatic weapon, AK-47s, and improvised explosive devices held up the American military for 20 years. Now, I don't personally argue for Second Amendment on, hey, somebody's going to come and I'm going to kill them. That's secondary to me because of where I live. But point being, it is one of those things, I guess you have to, that needs to be paid attention to. I think it's a really important point.
Listen, are you fast? Part of a civilized, going back to the question that was asked to me, yeah, I think that, do you not agree with Justice Anthony Scalia on the remarks he made about what a common use firearm is? Or do you believe that you should be allowed to create any weapon you want for any purpose you want?
Philip, could I just ask you the question? I'm not sure about his comments. Could you enlighten me on what he said?
And the Heller case basically made the argument about common use weapons. That if it's in population, it's common, and it's not something it's not something that's uncommon within the populace. For instance, your right to take a whole bunch of propane tanks and movie track your home, and then call that a right to self-defense is exactly what he's talking. Or your right to put them on your car, so if somebody decides to use you, blow them up, is not a right. You would say that's not a common feature of the Second Amendment. And you would actually argue that the Second Amendment leaves room for the government to regulate it within that right. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, yeah, you don't necessarily have a right to every type of firearm that could exist or does exist. But then that being said, I don't necessarily think at the same time the government gets to sit there and tell you if they don't like it that you're not allowed to have it. It comes down to the commonality of the weapon. And then for the military, I guess an AR, what is it, AR-11 or whatever on the civilian side. Those are common use. They're used all the time. There's great reason for people to own them. They're lightweight. The majority of people, regardless of a disability, can use them. Basically been ruled out by the Supreme Court. You have a right to own that weapon. You know, there's things you can do. I think the big issues are that they still have rights in this as well. You may see a little bit of nuance depending on the state limit and what it looks like under some of these things. And the Supreme Court on our last major gun case said as much. So, look, I don't think it's all or nothing. I don't think you get to have any weapon you want now. So you get to restrict any weapon they want.
Hold on. This thing about which weapons was Brent brings it up, and it's funny because it's always people of particular political ilk that will do this, and they'll ask the question about like what gun you could have, should have, whatever. And again, they don't really look at the data. They're like allergic to looking at the data. They'll sit there and they'll say things like nobody should have an AR-15. When you ask why, they give this explanation, and then when you ask them about a Ruger Mini 14, they don't really have an answer because they've never even heard of it. And, you know, anybody that's familiar with these two guns know that they're quite similar. They look a little different. One looks a little scarier because it's black. You know, so progressives tell on themselves they don't like anything black. But you get something that's a wood grain. That's okay. Mainly because politicians and, you know, the media folks have not told them that they're supposed to not like a Ruger Mini 14. The other thing that's interesting is that when they'll talk about like the ammo itself. Well, nobody needs this kind of ammo. 223, it's goddamn, it's 22 round. I don't know why people freak out about it. And if you were really concerned about bigger rounds, how come we never hear about AR-10s? And that fires 7.62, and we never hear anybody talk about that again. Why? Because politicians haven't lip-loaded them with these talking points. The only thing that they say is they repeat the thing that they watch on Rachel Maddow or whatever their favorite fucking TV show is that talks about this crap. They don't really do the research. And then, by the way, when you start looking into this stuff and really digging into the numbers, you start figuring out that 2/3 of homicides are committed with using a handgun. But yet, they're fixated on a particular rifle type that's responsible for less than 1% of the gun death. Again, I wouldn't expect them to change their arguments because they don't know the topic at all. They pretend that they care about the issue, but they've taken no time to learn anything about it.
You know what's always confusing to me? I never really understand this. The mechanisms that makes like a magazine pistol fire or my 1100 Remington 12-gauge shotgun or the mechanism in AR-15, they're exactly the same. The round, as you said, is like a plinker. It's also one of the
call it hammer. Pow!
Works very well for hog hunting in particular where I live, and functions quite well for its purpose. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out what the difference between an AR-15, my Remington 1100 shotgun with the plug removed, and a Beretta 380 with a clip. What the hell is the difference between those three?
Before someone answers you, do you eat the hogs that you hunt?
Oh yeah.
Yes, we do.
Oh yeah.
We do not kill things and feed them to the grackles. We eat everything we kill, as you're supposed to.
Well, let me ask you a question, Abby. Does it appear to you that he wouldn't? I mean, because
No.
a little bit off.
No, it appears to what I was just curious, like what they do with the hogs. No, go ahead, get your.
There's a disease in wild hogs. I don't know why wild hogs. What's it called? Marshall, what's the disease in wild hogs that you be careful about?
You're talking about the other one? It's
Democrats?
called it's what's known as collared peccary. They're not as dangerous as the hogs themselves.
Yeah. There's a disease that I'm going to say transfer if you're not careful.
Oh,
It's called foot, I think.
Hentafoot and trichinosis.
Yeah,
Usually
trichinosis.
you don't.
And this is your
Yeah.
third time, right? This is your third time dealing with it.
No, dude, I've been eating wild hog since I was in high school.
I just messed with you, Marshall.
Oh.
Ah, good one. He's got
Let
trichinosis.
Marshall get his answer to his question first. I just interrupted about hogs, but Marshall had a question.
Hugs and honeys.
You know, like the question, rephrase it.
Oh, it's unbearable.
Other than the amount of gunpowder in each bullet and the weight of each slug, what's the difference in all of those guns? Right? If people are worried, for example, about nobody should have something, or a round or magazine that holds any more than 10 shots. I believe my Remington shotgun, I can take probably about 14 with one in the chamber, right? And so I am just at a loss of what it is. If it's the number of bullets, well, yeah, that happens, but nobody really has the right to tell you how many bullets you need to solve your problem.
I mean, the truth is, mechanically, guns are very similar to each other. I mean, you have a bolt, you have a firing pin, you have a rifle that is bored.
Did you really just say that they're similar to each other?
I mean, basic parts, yeah. You bolt, firing pin. I mean, the mechanism for loading is different. A revolver is different, somewhat. But I mean, guns are kind of mechanically the basic part of a gun is going to be found in every gun. There's going to be a firing pin in every gun. There's going to be
Why do we choose then to only ban some guns over other guns?
Well, and that brings me to my question. So you made the point about commonality for weapons, that the M4 is a common weapon, which it absolutely is.
The M4 is not a common weapon. I made that correction. The M4 is a military weapon that is fully automatic or has that ability.
And the AR-15 is the variant on it. That's a common weapon. And I would argue the M4 is a common.
The AR-15 is a completely different weapon. If you've been in the military and fired that weapon versus the AR-15, they are vastly different.
That's not true at all. Let me finish my comment.
The damage from the round is completely different.
That's not true at all. That's not true at all.
It is. That's true.
Let's let Brent land, then I'll explain to you.
So I will land. I guess my question is, what is the limiting principle of the Second Amendment?
What is the limiting principles? Limiting principles!
Between functionalities and weaponry. I didn't
Fucking
ask you
guy.
that question. Like, you know, with all
Fucking
due respect,
loser. Oh, what a
at least do me the
fucking.
courtesy
Oh,
to, like,
so
not
terrible. Why do I have to watch this? Listen to this.
I thought the answer
God, I can't
guns
take
are kind of
it.
similar. I guess not.
Well, okay, so then you get to that point,
Oh, what
and
a
all semi-automatic
fucking.
firearms.
I wouldn't
are
be
similar.
here if it wasn't for the red stripe.
What's different about the AR then?
That's what I say. I mean, I don't really think there's that much mechanically different. So I was asking a follow-up based on my answer, if that's okay.
So what your issue with that one though is that
So getting back to the kind of follow-up on my answer, maybe it was a shitty answer. If all guns are similar and we're going off this commonality rule, what is the limiting
Principle.
logic of the Second
Limiting logic. Limiting. What is the maximizing logic? What is the maximizing principle? Oh, Brad.
Just give me 2 seconds and I will land. Just give me 2 seconds. Okay, well, if I'm wrong, you can correct me, right? You're welcome to. The 240 Bravo is a common weapon. There's thousands of them in the Army. So let me finish. Actually, there's probably hundreds of thousands of them in the Army, to be honest with you. So
Here's the question here, which is, if they all have the same commonality, then why are people freaking the fuck out over one of those and not all?
I acknowledge that question.
It's an education problem.
I guess my return question is, if that is the answer, and all guns are kind of similar,
it's not about a limiting principle. It's about a bunch of people.
I understand your question wasn't about a limiting principle.
It's like the worst thing since the second coming.
I understand. I understand.
Your side of the aisle does that.
I'm not doing that. I just said all weapons are the same.
I can answer your question, Mark. In your side, I think bankrupt in the argument.
No, I know your side's being bankrupt in the argument because you won't allow me to even get out a simple. I'm not asking. I never said you should be more precise. It will go somewhere. It will go somewhere if I'm allowed. It will go somewhere if y'all snowflakes will let me get out a question. Well, can that occur? Or are we going to snowflake? Are we going to snowflake? I can't ask a question because I can't get it out. Can I ask my question?
That was not an invitation for you to come off fucking mic. I'm not very good at this. It's not making you be mean to people. Use your common sense. Talk to each other. Answer the fucking questions. Again, and I'm going to restate this for the final time if you decide to ignore it. Again, you've been given clear time. Your side, you yourself, have argued that the AR-15 is not something that should be in civilian hands. So we go through what makes the AR-15 work and the kind of ammunition that it has. And you acknowledge that there is really no difference between my Remington 1100, which I can stick 12 to 14 shells in, and my AR and a 380 Beretta pistol, which I can carry 14 rounds in. You've admitted the functionality is the same. So unless your argument is that the bullet itself is the overall problem, which I personally think is fucking laughable, then your side is morally bankrupt on that because they are freaking the fuck out over a gun that's not different from the one you would use to go dove hunting in half the fucking country. It's ridiculous.
Well, I don't represent a group of people. I just represent myself. And you know, a semi-automatic weapon is a semi-automatic weapon. They're the same.
You represent so can't read or listen, I guess.
Okay. Well, okay. So I acknowledge they're the same. I don't think you should get overly hyperventilated over one semi being banned versus another semi being banned. I can't speak for anybody else.
Never go forward time. Never go forward time.
No, I don't agree with that. It's illogical to me. I can't speak for anybody else. I just gave my answer.
Obviously.
No, because
go to a question. You got shit brain damage.
Just like chill the fuck out, please.
Yeah, I'll chill out just real quickly, but I want to take his interpretation. Justice Scalia never said that it was commonality that just because the Army had 240, that meant the civilian populace could. Justice Scalia very much made the abilities for somebody to own a gun, like a common handgun. You couldn't sit there and say to somebody they're not allowed to own a handgun in Washington, D.C. When it's very clear that the majority of people that own guns own handguns, and therefore it's a common weapon among the populace. So I don't know why you're trying to misrepresent my words, Brent, and take on an M240, which is exclusive to the military almost in all details. There are some of the civilian populace, but for the majority of times, like the military, those guns are not being made for the civilian populace. And people like Marshall, where he'd probably love to have one, can't just go to his local gun store and buy one. So the idea that you want to misrepresent what Scalia did shows you your ignorance and shows that you're actually not here to get a big argument. At the end of the day, your argument is guns equal bad, therefore nobody should have them, and then the fact that we actually have principles, which Marshall went into, about what gun ownership is and gun rights are, you're absolutely disingenuous, and the idea that we're going to let you answer another question that's just going to be disingenuous to what people are saying on stage, I would absolutely
Fucking destroyed, Brad. Oh.
spend more time on it. We're going to go down a rabbit hole. As much as I have
Oh!
known for
Oh, beautiful.
rabbit trails.
Oh, what a beautiful summary of that whole fucking incident. Oh, really fuck, that was the crossover I needed. To quote
What's going on? What's your opinion?
Woo.
You've been sitting here listening to this for a minute. Bueller? I guess not. Snoopy? You there? Snoopy's gone too?
No, I have nothing to say.
Okay.
Snoopy, I have a question for Snoopy though. The stuff
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
that you were talking about with Rodney King, how much press was on that? How much? I mean, it's like the first time I'm hearing it, and I'm not questioning.
First time you're hearing about the Korean Defenders of Liberty? You fucking stugaz. You don't know shit, Abby. Jesus.
I'll answer you succinctly.
I will answer you succinctly.
You were very aware of it. And it's very easy to confirm with Google that LA is run by a leftist government, a progressive government, and the government during the Rodney King riots, they just didn't have enough manpower to protect all the neighborhoods. So there was something called triage, right? The leaders of LA had to allow certain neighborhoods to be murdered and raped and looted and protect other neighborhoods. And so a strategic decision was made by the liberals, by the leftists. The police pulled back, and you can actually look at the articles. 0 of the rapists and murderers came to Brentwood. 0 of them came to Pacific Palisades. 0 of them came to Westwood. The murderers and rapists went to Koreatown, and they raped and murdered Korean people. It was the most racist thing that was done during the Rodney King riots, and it was done by white liberals who decided to sacrifice Asians, let Asians be brutalized in order to protect whites. It's not even controversial that that's what they did. You can read in all the papers. Now, a small number of Koreans, because they owned high-powered rifles, very easy, the Koreans went to the roof of some buildings. They invited women and girls, come into these buildings. We will protect you from being raped and murdered by the people who have been unleashed. And these Korean men, bravely on the rooftop, they had bullhorns. They announced, if you come to this building to rape and murder, we will shoot you. And actually, a bunch of the liberal looters actually did approach the buildings. They were shot dead. The Koreans successfully shot dead a lot of looters. And then the other looters are like, holy shit, you know, this neighborhood is defended, and they pulled back. Now, what the story I just told you is not controversial. It's very, very well known. Anyone in America that believes in the right to own guns should study this, because this is the best example of how a liberal, leftist, progressive government, it will not protect you from looters. It will protect the people who are politically connected. Okay.
Thank you very much, Snoopy. Please go ahead and put that information in the chat. Thank you for
Snoopy for president! Oh, the liberal paradigm destroyed!
And you sort of, the people working the store just kind of stand there and let it happen. You see, it's like all over Instagram.
Two amazing pack-ups. We're gonna have to cut the mic soon.
Are they defending themselves, or how are they approaching it?
No, actually, I'll answer you very succinctly. No, the Koreans have been Americanized. They have been pacified. So the government of LA says is, if you are a Korean store owner and you shoot a looter, like, we'll put you in prison. So the Koreans today, it's very easy for you to come to LA, because Koreans back during the Rodney King riots, they had the courage, they had the balls to protect themselves with high-powered rapid-firing weapons. Koreans today are too scared to defend themselves. That's why Koreans today allow the looters to come and do whatever the fuck they want in Koreatown. I'll post in the room chat, I'm done speaking.
Like, thank you.
Snoopy! Oh, people are on fire, Snoopy!
This time, my friend, are you there?
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Go ahead. Your turn.
So, yeah.
What we were talking about recently, or you can go back to the bump stocks at the start of the top of the page, whichever you prefer.
So I think my issue with the Second Amendment is that technology is far advanced. Because we already break the Second Amendment in a lot of its limitations. In fact, I see no good reason for us to ban any weapons of any kind. I don't think it makes sense constitutionally to ban any weapons. We do ban some weapons just because we know it doesn't make sense to not ban any weapons, but there's no constitutional reason to do so. In fact, if people were to challenge it, I do believe that we could end all weapons bans, because again, there's really no limit that the Second Amendment placed on any types of weapons. There's no limit there. We just kind of made the limit and has just never challenged it. I think the challenge on bump stocks or any other weapon comes from the fact that we say we want to limit based on how indiscriminate something is. But it's such a vague, non-constitutional standard that I think we're going to always find ourselves arguing about one weapon or another. As technology advances, weapons are going to be better at doing large amounts of killing in smaller amounts of time. And we're going to be able to manufacture them easier. We already have 3D printing at this point. We're really going to have to rethink and relook at the Second Amendment, because arms actually is not just about guns. Everything is an arm, from knives to explosives. So again, as technology advances, we really have to...
They were talking about at the time primarily made its way around, say, pieces of artillery, muskets, shotguns, rifles. If you were very wealthy, you could buy volley guns, which were guns made, they're probably about, say, 5-6 inches around. And you fill them with tubes, and it's one of the first automatic weapons, and it's invented in the mid to late 1700s. So, like I said, if you were wealthy when this came out, you could buy it. In the Napoleonic Wars, it was common issue to the British Navy. So you have that kind of consistency in the way that stuff works. I think personally there will always be a need for weaponry of some kind. As much I would like to believe otherwise is nice. It's not.
Well, while I agree that there is some weapons everyone should have a right to, whether we agree or not, the Supreme Court has agreed that we want to limit some weapons, which I don't think we have the Constitution go ahead to do. And if we want to interpret it, right, this is where the crossroads, right? If you want to interpret it as, well, we want to limit it to the weapons they had in mind during that time, well, then we're limiting a lot of weapons, including these bump stocks. If we want to, so that's all the issue of that interpretation. All weapons really should be
limited, right? So Keller EC, Keller EC points out that the fundamental is not essentially like unmanageable or ungovernable right. So within the bounds of our states today of the kinds of restrictions they would have placed on guns during the start of the country, things like churches, certain businesses, bars, and all that was constitutional for the time with this stuff.
Yeah, but Marshall, there's no need for us to have the boringest part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Why don't we get to the important piece, which people like to gloss over? Because people get you have people that vacillate between their emotional responses and these political biases that have been ingrained in them by the political parties. They're not really putting a lot of thought into it. The thought that I would ask people to put in, it has more to do with why do we think that gun ownership was important in the first place? And I think that this is something that maybe we should look at, not just in the U.S. context, but go look where people have been disarmed. And here's a statement that I'm going to make that is irrefutable. You can say whatever you want. It's irrefutable. Which is, armed people are more difficult to oppress. And so, unless you're pro-oppressing, I can't think of a good argument of why we should head down the road of disarming. And again, as I say this, you're going to have somebody that's going to think that they've come up with a clever argument. But the only contribution that I really want to make here is two things. The first one is the people that talk about taking the guns or restricting this gun or this particular type of ammo or magazine capacity, they have done zero research into the statistics about gun violence. They can't clearly articulate a problem they want to solve. They never offer up a policy prescription that would target that problem that they want to solve. And then the second point is, if you don't want to be oppressed, then you need to fight for the right to have guns. And I'll just leave it there, and then I'll let people be wrong.
No, I'm going to chime in on something you just said, because what we found after October 7th in Israel, gun ownership is hard there, private gun ownership. And yeah, in the different places that were attacked, most people do not have private gun ownership. I mean, the only gun there, it's very strict guidelines. You have to register every bullet for private gun ownership. But it was only on October 7th they loosened the gun ownership laws for the citizens. But had the people had guns in their houses, they would have gun status.
I think that's a very good
no
point.
question about that. Yeah, and then laws totally changed. So I'm not sure. I wish Darren was still in the app because he could tell you, that law very, very clearly.
It's probably that they're registering the number of bullets, not the individual bullets themselves. Like saying, I have 1,000 rounds of 9mm, and then registering the box.
It could be. Let me find out. I don't know, but I do know that is the law. That or at least it was the law pre-October 7th. How much they loosened it up and their requirements, and look, everyone's mandatory conscription, so they know how to shoot a gun, like everyone in the country, but they still have to have like a 3-day training. They make it more involved, but I think that they made that all lapse. But I will find out the answer to that. But the answer to Roger's point, 100%, you would have had a lot less loss of life if people had guns in their house.
I think too, right? Like I'm on board with that obviously completely. It makes a lot of sense. But I don't even think in terms of like defense against the state or defense against enemies of the state. I don't even think it has to go that far. I think for me the simplest argument for gun ownership is that equal protection, the ability for somebody to protect themselves. And what I mean is, right, I'm 240 pounds, I'm 6'2", I've trained a lot of different things. My ability to protect myself unarmed is going to be much higher than someone who's a lot older than me and is infirm at that point, or somebody that is a lot smaller than me, right? I'm going to have an elevated ability to protect myself in a situation. And that's unfair, right? So as somebody ages, they should still be able to protect themselves. And I know in the United States, police response time is something like 20 minutes. So what we're saying is if we're removing the ability for people to have responsible gun ownership, is that this individual doesn't have a right to the safety of their body in the same way that somebody else does who's larger or younger or something like that. And I think furthermore, the discussion is always, well, what types of guns? We don't want the scary assault rifles. Well, I mean, ask somebody what the difference is between an assault rifle and a hunting rifle that are semi-automatic, and I guarantee they're going to stutter their way through a dumb answer until they realize that in terms of functionality, there's no difference. It just has to do with like the grip itself and the way that the gun is shaped, and pretty much has nothing else to do with the functionality. So my primary argument is just revolving around the ability for someone to have a right to protect themselves.
Let me piggyback off that real quick. There's one thing that you said that I think is really important, and that's in regards to police response time. So not only are the police too slow to respond to emergencies, they're under no obligation to save them. When Uvalde took place, you had the police. The only people they were apprehending were concerned parents that wanted to save their children. The courts have already decided that police do not have to risk their life to save your life. And so once you know that, once you understand that, then you realize that, like, well, shit, if worse came to worse, what would I do to defend myself? The idea that you're supposed to call the police is just a bogus idea.
That's an awesome point as well, man. Absolutely. And that Uvalde was just a fucking travesty. And I've told my fiance, because she works at a school, I'm well armed, I know how to use them. I said, if anything ever happens in that school, and they're not sending people in, text me immediately. I'm not trying to sound like fucking Hulk Hogan or I'm going to save the day, but I try. right? And I drive my fucking car into a goddamn wall, through a door, to get in there and try and do something. It was a fucking travesty. And I think it just illustrated that the police are there for the goddamn state. They don't give a fuck about defending citizens. It is disgusting. I fully agree, Roger.
Bro, there's a guy, hold on guys. There's a guy in Washington State, his name is Trips. He's former military. He has a tactical vest. He's very well armed, and he has a dog who's very well trained. And he literally patrols the outer perimeter across the street from the local high school after they had a shooting. And what's interesting is that there was people outside of the community that had these concerns and said, hey, is this what we want? And the police, interestingly enough, they didn't really want him there, but they also didn't want to say, well, maybe we should have a presence there because they didn't have the resources, and by the way, they wouldn't do anything anyways. And what he did was spark a conversation. And I'm not saying that he solved the problem, but what he did was he sparked the conversation that who is supposed to keep the kids safe?
Like everybody's Republican struggle.
But the two times I've needed them, I've called my neighbor who has an arsenal of weapons. I've always been meaning to go buy shotgun. I kind of hate guns. I'd love to get rid of all guns. I really would. I wish I could. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd get rid of all guns and alcohol. Guess what? That's not up to me. So.
Monica, do you want to go?
Oh, I'm a 2A rights advocate. I mean, there's the Bill of Rights is there for a reason. And the 2A is there for when the 1A isn't altered. So, you know, like, I think our focus should be on mental health. If someone